obliged, much obliged. I just wanted to see you and chat with you. How are you, anyhow? It's nice, because it's great. Glad to be in Los Angeles, my goodness. This is my home, you know. I got a little ranch out there, Santa Monica way, and, well, I do, and we call them ranches in California, you know. It don't cost nothing more on the lien, you see, that way. But I call mine the Rancho Primero y Segundo Mortgages. Now, the literal translation of that is ranch of the first and second mortgages. Boy, I'll tell you, there'd be a third one, too, if them bankers was just a little more liberal-minded, you know. But I see we've got some country folk arriving late here, and welcome to you all. I reckon their flivver broke down on the road. It's nice to have you here, I must say, and some other folks there, too, coming in, and folks, listen, I'd go back to the beginning, but I ain't sure where that is now. I'm sorry. But you almost meet it anyway. And, I was just telling him when I come out here to this land of milk and honey. 1919, now to be exact, I first come out to Los Angeles, and of course there was nothing here in them days, just a bunch of real estate agents selling lots to one another. That's all it was. Sure, you know, Los Angeles means the angles anyway, you know. But now, my golly, well, what is the city? 375 square miles. Now, my golly, you know, I mean, you hit the city limits, you've got to allow at least a day, you know, to get into the well in the middle of town. But anyway, I come out, you know, to work in motion pictures in them days, and of course that was before they was referred to as an art. I can tell you that right now. Most of the big stars today was just then learning to get married for the first time, you know. Whenever I come being back home here, I always like to go to Hollywood, you know, and see what we got left. Boy, there ain't much, is there? I'll tell you. Most of the show socially prominent people that come out to work in the motion pictures, they all starved out and went back home, you know. But Hollywood, folks, is still very much like an African water hole now, and you know, you stick around long enough, and sooner or later you're going to see every species of animal stop by for some refreshments from time to time. I got some inside dope for you on the movies, on the motion pictures, and I'm going to pass it on to you. I don't know whether you know this, but there is no such thing as Greta Garbo. Did you know that? No, that's right. Marlene Dietrich plays both parts. I didn't know whether you knew that or not. I used to be mayor, you know, of Beverly Hills there. That, of course, was before mayor was a national disgrace, you know. I never met your mayor. I'd certainly like to meet the man sometime. I'm sure we'd get along, because, you know, we're both in the same business, after all. Kidding the public, and I believe we get along. I ain't going to kid you, though. Listen, I want to tell you right now, folks, honestly, I got to apologize to you for my appearance. I'm going to be very honest with you. I do not own a dress suit. I just don't. I got 2 street suits and plenty of underwear, so don't worry about anything. But you're going to hear, boy, I'll tell you, you're going to hear a very illiterate act tonight. Now, but it's clean, folks. By that I mean it's ungrammatical, but sanitary is what it is. I'm a lecturer, see? You all know the difference between a comedian and a lecturer, don't you? A comedian entertains and a lecturer annoys. And most lecturers have written a book generally on sex. I've never written a book on sex, but boy, as soon as I find out something about it, I'm going to write one. By that I don't mean that you've got to know, you know, what you're writing about to write a book. I mean, 90% would never get written if that were true. It's just that I'd like to know something about sex, even though I'm not going to write about it. Well, let's start the act. I always have difficulty beginning my act, and there have been those that have suggested that it wasn't absolutely necessary to do so, you know. But heavens, we're all here. Let's have a go at it, you know, until something better turns up. I tell you, let's be original. Let's start at the very beginning there with the 3 big words, I was born. Now, That's close to the beginning anyway, I believe. May not be the exact beginning, but folks, listen here. You know that in them days now, people didn't know nothing better. You know, it was just a habit with them in them days now. Why, listen, a doctor could bring you into the world in them days for $2, honestly, and make a very good living at it. It really could. I was born in the Indian Territory in what is now known as Oklahoma. And my father was a 3/8 Cherokee Indian, and my mother was a quarter-blood Cherokee, and I never got far enough in arithmetic to figure out just how much Indian that makes me, but there's nothing in my life, well, I'll tell you, of which I'm more proud than my Indian blood. I was born in a little place called Oologah. Now, only an Indian can pronounce that, boy, and so I claim Claremore as my home, see? Life is tough enough without lugging Oologah around in your wallet. So listen, we just built the first Indian hospital out there in Claremore. We're very proud of it out there. The first hospital for the Indians in the United States. And well, let's see now. Columbus discovered America, what was it, 400 years ago, and it's taken us 400 years to build a hospital for the Indians. Just think what us Indians have got to look forward to in the next 400 years. Well, they might even build a cemetery for us. You know, when the government sent the Cherokees out there to Oklahoma, they gave them a treaty. I guess you know that. And the treaty said, you may have this land as long as the grass grows and the water flows. And it was not only a pretty good rhyme, but it looked like a pretty good treaty, you know, until they struck oil. And then naturally they took the land back from us again. You know, they said the treaty refers to grass and water. It don't say nothing about oil on it. Every time the government shipped the Indians someplace, they always give them that same treaty. I don't know why, but they always did, you know. And it always said, you may have this land as long as the grass grows and the water flows. And well, now, of course, the government has solved the whole thing. They just put the Indians on land where the grass won't grow and the water won't flow, is what they did. But of course, when I was born, I couldn't have cared less about that. I was just a baby after all. And when I was born, folks, childbirth was not grounds for divorce now. I mean, any family having not at least 8 kids, the father was either deceased or in jail, one of the two. Mother and baby doing well was our national yell in them days. Of course, I'm the only kid in history, I don't know whether you know this, but I'm the only kid in history that's born on election day who will admit it. Most guys deny it, but I admit it. I was born November 4th, and what happened there was women couldn't vote in them days, and my mother thought she'd do something, so she stayed home and give birth to me, is what she done. Naturally, I wanted to get even with the government, you know. That's why I've always kind of had it in for the politicians. Folks, listen here. Now run a little political test with me, would you please? Now really, I'm very serious now. The next time a politician gets up, see, to speak on something really big and important, just notice that he isn't saying anything. Folks, you're going to have to listen very carefully or the guy will slip it right by you now, I'm telling you. They're very sly. I don't know what philosophy them birds is preaching, honestly. I don't have a philosophy. I don't know the meaning of the word. You know, I never got past the 4th grade McGuffies in school. But what I believe is, honestly, that them guys is simply trying to tell Americans what's good for them. Honestly, and I don't believe that's too hard to figure out. I think all an American really needs is a hamburger, a 1-piece bathing suit, and 5 gallons of gasoline. And like, you know, he's as tickled as a movie star with a new divorce, you know. I went to school for a little while. I know it's hard to believe, but I did. I went to school, a little 1-room log cabin schoolhouse about 4 miles east of Chelsea, Oklahoma. There was nothing but Indian kids in that school, and you know, I had Indian blood in me. Just enough white blood to make my honesty questionable, and then I went to the Kemper Military Academy for 2 years. The first year in the 4th grade, and the second year in the guardhouse, and both years just about as bad as the other, I can tell you that. Oh, I could have gone to West Point, but I was too proud to speak to a congressman, you know, and one night I just up and left him, folks. I gave up the whole education business for life. But I don't want, honestly, any enterprising youth in this audience to think that I had the right dope on that, because I'll tell you, kids, There's one thing I have regretted all my life, and that is that I never took a chance on the 5th grade. But listen here, college is great, by golly. College, I believe college is greater for the parents than it is for the kids, you see? Because what you do is you take the kid out of the home just when he reaches the arguing stage of life. Did you ever have an 18-year-old kid stand there and look at you and say, look at old Dad standing there. How did he ever live so long and know so little? I don't understand. Well, what you do is you put them away for 4 years, see? Then when they come back, they know you don't know nothing, see? People are always saying to me, will college pay? Why, of course college will pay. If you're a halfback or a basketball player, they pay you very well, I understand. And of course, college athletes are always saying to me, when should I turn pro? And I say, not until you've earned all you can in college, for heaven's sake. One little drawback, folks, to being a college football hero, they will not permit you to take your cheerleaders with you through life, see? It gets very silent right after graduation out there. But the charge is made these days, you know, you've heard it made 1,000 times. The colleges are commercialized. I don't believe that's true at all, no more than United States Steel or General Motors, either one. Of course, honestly, these days, folks, I really believe that the law schools in this country are just, you know, the kids are just studying to be politicians. Honestly, you can't hardly find a law school in this country now that doesn't, from time to time, through some inherent weakness in the school, turn out a senator or a congressman, you know, or even a president if their rating is real low, you know. God knows they don't turn out enough lawyers, we know that. But I don't know why I kick the politicians. I really don't know why, because they provided me with more hours of merriment than anything in my whole life. Well, I mean it. It's why I never miss a political convention, boy. I'll tell you, if I can help it, I go as a reporter, you know, but I've been there. You all know the best place to hold a political convention, don't you? That's in Chicago. You know where Chicago is, don't you? Slightly north of the United States up there. We got an amazing situation in Chicago, see? They've got the stockyards right here. And then they got the convention hall right there. And the fumes from both of them meet in the middle, see? Folks, it's a heady brew. It's a heady brew. I remember the last time there that the Republicans had Chicago. Oh my goodness, I went, you know, as a reporter, but I was there. Why, folks, I tell you, it was so hot the day I arrived that perspiration was a marketable commodity. And the convention hall was so crowded that I mopped 3 brows before I got to my own. I guess, you know, the first couple of days at the conventions, they pray. Everybody knows that, I reckon. And, the first prayer, I believe, is called the keynote prayer. I don't remember him mentioning the Bible, though, in any of the prayers, except maybe the amen at the finish. Folks, I'd like to say this, honestly, that if the good Lord can see his way clear to blessing the Republican Party the way it's been carrying on lately, I don't believe the rest of us are even going to have to ask for it, honestly. They got a kind of a minority report over here. Oh dear. Well, you have to know where you're sailing, you know, to avoid the shows. Oh, wait a minute. They did mention, they did mention our Savior. Yes, they did, in one of the prayers. But I found out later they meant Herbert Hoover. Yes, now that's the way they rated him. It was Hoover, Lincoln, and the Lord is his name. What, they picked the engineer over the carpenter, is what they did. And when the praying got all done, see, then a lady got up in a great big hat. And she had a dandy voice. She sung the national anthem. Oh, and she knew the words. That's really, she didn't have to read it. And they applauded her, I believe, because she knew the words and didn't have to read it. And then she sung America. They applauded her again. You know. Then she sung Dixie, and they applauded. The old dame just would not stop singing. That's all. Then H.L. Mencken jumped up and suggested she sing Marching Through Georgia. I knocked him under the press table before he could be heard. When I went into the hall there, I was with William Jennings Bryan, a good and dear friend of mine, old Bill Bryan. And Bryan and me, you know, we was the only two aliens in the whole hall. Bryan was a solitary Democrat, and I was a bull moose, you know, so we huddled together there against the barbarian hordes, and you know, folks, I've always felt that William Jennings Bryan would have made an ideal Sunday president. Of course, the other 6 days of the week, he'd have been an absolute liability, but that's not... He was there to write seriously about the convention, and I was there to write humorously, and of course I had by far the easier job, you know. All you got to do to write humorously about a political convention is just tell what happened, that's all. And the first big joke is who gets nominated. Folks, I want to tell you, for some calamitous reason, I was ever nominated by one of our political parties. I would keep it a very dark secret. There is no way in this world you're going to make a political party respectable unless you keep it out of office now. You take a Democrat, folks. Now, many people will simply not associate with the Democrat, but you keep that guy out of office and well, he can get along with almost anybody, you know. Same way with a Republican. Keep the guy broken out of office and, why, you know, he's just as nice a fella as you'd ever want to meet. And, some of my best friends are out of office, I must tell you. Finally, at these conventions, there comes a moment of very high drama. See, when some guy or gal gets up and on cue accuses the other party of higher taxes. Higher taxes, you know. Well, you've heard them. You've heard them. It's just terrible, ain't it? I mean, when they start talking about taxes, you're going to hear a howl that sounds like a coyote in heat. You know, they say, well, you've heard them. They say, wait just a minute here. They say, wait a minute here. Where's the money coming from that we're spending? Now, where's it coming from? You know, well, I don't know. But I kind of think now that it's coming from them that have got it. Now, I don't know that, folks. That's just a rough idea of mine. But I kind of reckon that's where it's coming from, honestly. Because taxpayers, my golly, we're great, ain't we? I'll bet you. Folks, listen, we've been yelling for centuries. I'll bet you honestly that when the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock, and they had the whole American continent, you know, and all they had to do, really, to get another 160 acres was shoot another Indian, that they was complaining about the price of ammunition. I'll bet you they said, what's this country coming to, you know, when we have to pay a nickel for our powder. Of course, they could always get their lead back when they dissected the Indian, but... Every one of us in this hall tonight, every single soul in this hall tonight knows that this government of ours is costing us more than it's worth. We all know that. But folks, where do you know a cheaper form floating around any place now? If you do, they'll sell you a ticket down there in Washington any day in the week. Now you take Russia. If you care to, take Russia. Now listen, wait a minute. They got no income tax in Russia, but they got no income. Listen, I don't know nothing about this. I really don't. I don't know nothing more than an economist does, and God knows he don't know nothing. But you know, this running for president is a hazardous business, folks. Do you realize statistics show that only one man can be president? Did you know that? It's what you call a long shot office, is what that one is, eh? In 1920, the Republicans nominated Warren Harding, and there was only 2 detrimental points in Harding's whole record. One was that his middle name was Gamaliel or something that nobody could pronounce. And the other was that he once played slide trombone in a country band, and musical circles in Washington was looking forward to a great revival with Harding in office. See, Harding come from the state of Ohio, and Ohio claimed that they was due a president. Well, since they had not had one since Taft. But look at the United States. We ain't had one since Lincoln, you know. Harding was elected. I went in to see him, and I said, I'd like to tell you the latest political jokes, Mr. President. And he said, you don't have to, Will. I appointed them. I don't want want you to get the idea now, folks, for heaven's sakes, that the Republicans have got a corner on the comedy market. Because, boy, I'll tell you, it ain't true. There is nothing funnier in this world than a Democrat. I want to make an announcement, and that is I am not a member of any organized political party. I'm a Democrat. I remember when the Democrats had their soiree, their convention the last time. I went to it as a reporter. Folks, I got to tell you, it was a terrible thing to see, really. Them guys was fighting with each other now. Now, the reason for that is that they're Democrats. They got to do it. I don't know. It's in the rule book. I don't know the number, but it's in there. And I want to tell you, they was living up to the rule, folks, and pushing a little bit beyond it. You know what I mean? What I mean is they was going after each other's jugulars, is what they was doing. They were tearing each other limb from limb, in fact. The whole hall was awash with Democratic blood. Very little of it blue, but it was there. What would you think them birds was fighting about? Now, would you think it was war and peace, maybe? Well, you'd be wrong. Or maybe hunger or unemployment. You'd be very wrong. They was fighting that way to the death about whether to seat a delegation on the floor, in the balcony, or in the parking lot. You talk about civilization, folks, I tell you, if they had run a sanity test in that hall that night, 99% of them birds would have been carted off to the insane asylum. And then they sat down and wrote their platform. 45 pages thick. There she was, boy, 45 pages. Now, if them guys had just come out and said what they really believed in, they could have saved 44 pages. You see, when you straddle an issue, it takes a lot more explaining, folks. That's the problem. But I want to tell you right now, I don't believe that there is a senator or a congressman or even a president, honestly, that can really hurt this country. I don't believe it, because it's too big. Folks, stopping America really today would be like spitting on a railroad track to stop a freight train. I don't think it can be done, huh? And it's why I never take a politician seriously, boy, if I can help it. I'll tell you, it'll be a sign of senility when I do, folks. Take this whole gag about America must be the moral leader of the world. Where can you find me, folks, a senator or a congressman who will not stand up from time to time and say, my fellow Americans, America must lead the world, see? We must show these other poor boobs that our way is the way. You heard it a few times. Well, so we set out helping the world. I don't know, seems to me lately we've been yelling help more than giving it. Folks, we'll send Marines to any nation that can get 10 people to say they want us. You know that. Folks, listen, you see what it is? We're in the humanity business. That's what we're in, and by golly, we're going to do it right. You know what I mean? Oh, come on, folks. If we had any morals, we'd use them ourselves. You know that. What we do is we send these Marines over there now to keep them folks from shooting each other. And if necessary, we'll shoot them to keep them from shooting each other. Honestly, folks, if we're going to regulate the affairs now of every little nation in this world that we feel is plotting against us, we are simply going to have to recruit more Marines. That's all there is to it. There ain't going to be enough to go around, folks. I had an amazing experience just the other day. I seen a Marine in America, you know. And we love to send delegates. Have you ever noticed that? My golly, it's in the blood. I tell you honestly, folks, if there was an egg-laying conference in Czechoslovakia, and we could find it, we would send more delegates and lay more eggs than any other nation. Talk about, have you ever heard the phrase dollar diplomacy? Well, I guess you've heard it a few times. Well, folks, there's a lot of dollars and very little diplomacy, honestly. Why, listen here, we've left our diplomatic calling cards, on the doorstep of every little nation in this world, in the form of a gunboat or violets shaped like Marines, At one point there, the United States Marine Corps was enforcing American diplomacy all the way from the Yangtze River in China to the headwaters of Lake Managua in Nicaragua. Now, let me ask you something, my fellow Americans. What would we say if the Chinese was to send a gunboat up the Mississippi? With their Marines on it. All they'd have to do is just say, we're protecting our laundries in Memphis. that some of these little nations ain't so crazy about it. I think I'm a man of peace myself. Boy, I tell you, I see no more humor in war than I see reason for them, and I got a couple of schemes for stopping them, and I'm going to pass them on to you here. The first one is that no nation be allowed to enter into a war until it's paid for the last one. Now, folks, that ain't going to stop, but it'll slow them down considerably. Now, the next one is kind of scientific, so please do not let your eyes waver from my form for a moment. Now, this, you may take notes if you care to. This is called the Rogers moving plan for ending wars in, here it is. Now, there's Germany. All right, there's France. See? Now, they've been cheek by jowl for centuries, and they've been fighting for centuries, too. All right, just take France and move it. Put it over here where Japan is. Take Japan, put Japan over. Now, they may fight, but at least it'll be something different. And there's Mexico and us. Boy, we had our little difficulties sometimes. Get Mexico out of there. Just get them, trade them off for Turkey. Bring Turkey over, you know, with the harems and the dancing gals. It might be kind of fun down there for a while. And then there's the British and the Irish. All right, get the British away from the Irish. Just get them out of there, see? Put them up in Canada. Let them live off their son-in-law for a while. Just don't tell the Irish where you put them or they'll go get them. That's it. I gotta tell you, honestly, I believe we're going to go on meddling. I really do. I believe it's the nature of the beast. You know, I just got back from Europe, and I've got to tell you, bad news tonight, Americans. Well, they blame us for everything in the world. Did you know that? They call us Uncle Shylock over there. Yes, they do, and I don't care what it is that's bad with the world, we done it. You know, whether it's famine, pestilence, acne, or tight underwear, we done it. When I was in Europe, now this is a true story. When I was in Europe, they had a little jailbreak over there. And the European newspapers blamed it on the influence of American motion pictures. It's the truth. They said that American motion pictures give the prisoners that unusual idea of breaking out of jail. Oh, and when I was in Paris, some American tourists were hissed and stoned. Not until they'd finished buying, but then they got... I tell you, there's only one way that France can hate us worse than she does now, and that's if we help her out of another war, folks. I had an interesting experience when I went to get my passport there down in the bowels of New York City. I'm going to pass out to you. I went into the bureau, and there's a very nice-looking lady there, and she said, "Here's your application, Mr. Rogers. Fill it out. Bring it back with your birth certificate, and then we'll give you your passport." And I said, "I do not have a birth certificate." And she said, "That's all right." She said, "Here's an affidavit." She said, "Fill it out, bring it back, and have somebody in New York swear that at some point in your life you may have been born, and then we'll be able to keep your birth certificate." And I said, "That's going to be rather difficult, because I don't believe there's anybody in New York who was present at that historical occasion. It was a private affair and not a public function." I said, "What would you advise that I do? Will it be necessary for me to be born again, you know?" Well, I remember Billy Sunday, see, the evangelist. Before he passed the collection plate, he would always say, "You will be born again." I'd never taken him literally until that moment. Evidently, Billy had been to Europe, you see. See, folks, when I was a kid in the Indian Territory, we simply did not have any birth certificates. We just didn't have them, that's all. We figured if you was there, that was certificate enough, you know. We was very trusting folks in them days. We figured if you was there, that at some point in your life, you must have been born, see. Then the gal said, "Was you ever in Who's Who?" And I said, "I ain't even in the New York telephone books." And that's the most ordinary group of mortals ever put between two covers. Then she said, "If there's somebody in New York here who could swear they knew your parents, and then we could draw the conclusion, you know, that you might have been born by them," and so on. Well, I didn't know what to do, frankly, and I went to see my boss, Mr. Florian Ziegfeld, a very fine fellow, very bright man. I'd never spoken more than 2 or 3 words to him in all the years I'd worked for him, and he'd spoken to me on numerous occasions, naturally. generally about a reduction in salary, and this was no exception, boy. I tell you, I walked in the room and he said, reduction in salary, and, right away. And I said, okay. Surprised him half to death, but I needed my passport, see, and I was desperate. And I got it. I just want to say to you foreigners in the audience who think it's tough getting into this country, you ought to be an American and try and get out just once. Quite an experience, huh? My first stop over there was in Rome, and I've got to tell you, folks, boy, Rome was not built in a day. It is no Miami Beach by any matter of means. They got more churches in Rome and less preaching in them than any other city in the world. I had an audience with Benito Mussolini, I'll tell you a little bit about it. I know, I embarrassed our ambassador. I know that. The poor guy, he arranged the audience, see. And he was dressed, as they have to in the ambassadorial service, like a waiter, you know. And I was dressed as I am now. Now, something you got to understand about that is, if I'm not dressed as I am now, I'm apt to be naked, see? And I went in there, and little Mussolini would say, listen, he's a little guy. Did you know that? I always thought he was a big man. I don't know why. I guess it's because he's always standing on balconies, you know, and stuff. But he's got a great big chest and a big jaw, but he's a little squirt. He stands about so high. And he said, did you want to interview me? And I said, no. No, I said, I just come over here all these thousands of miles to see what kind of a bird you were, you know. And he smiled very quickly. You know, I believe that was to show he was a regular guy, you know, and that was the last time the man smiled in the entire interview. We talked there now, honestly, it must have been 25 or 30 minutes in broken English, both of us, you know. And, I didn't want to anger the little guy, I really didn't, because I remember that old gag about the Christians and the lions. Remember that they had in Rome? I didn't want to repeat on that one over there. And, oh, say, listen, of course, that was the Christian era. Remember the Christian? They had the barbarians and the Christians in them days. We still got them now. We call them the Baptists and the Methodists now. I found out from Mussolini that they used to have senators in Rome. And now, of course, we know why it declined, folks. I mean, that explains a good deal about that there. I spent a very nice day with the Prince of Wales in England when I was there. And I bring greetings to you. And listen, folks, we kidded that man altogether too much. I was with him an entire day and shared dinner with him. And, you know, we're always kidding the man. We say, you know, that he's playing and he should be princing, you know, things like that. And remember the picture he had of him falling off his horse there? It was in the rotogravure section. You remember that in the Sunday paper? And America said, look, the guy can't ride. You know what I mean? Folks, I'd like to play. I've been riding all my life. And they tell me a little bit before that, you know. And I got to tell you that, boy, it takes really, when your horse falls, you have a tendency to join him, folks. Really now. It takes an expert rider, you know, to pause up there until the horse... I had a couple of bad hours there at the very beginning when I first met the Prince of Wales, and I kept calling him Prince, and I felt like I was talking to a dog. I had a very nice evening with George Bernard Shaw and Sir James Barry. I was at a dinner party, and I guess it's in my honor, I don't know, they said so, and I was sitting right next between them two guys, and boy, it was something or other, I'll tell you. And old Shaw, he's a fine man, he really is, and he says he's coming over to visit us, folks, as soon as we get civilized. I told him not to hold his breath, anyway. But him and me is kind of alike, you know. Now, it's interesting. Two guys so different and yet so much alike. We both know there's something wrong with the world, you know. But neither one of us know what to do to fix it. But we're both willing to try at so much per word. That's really it. On a little more serious note, folks, I'd like to say this. That the last war isn't the greatest example against future wars that the human race might need. Boy, I tell you, I believe we deserve everything we get, and we're probably going to get it. I visited every country over there in Europe that is humorously referred to as the winners of the last war. And then I visited Germany, that is humorously referred to as the loser. Folks, I tell you, if the next war is anything like the last one, I wouldn't give you a 5-cent piece to be the winner. War is the only game where everybody loses. Why do we keep playing it? I don't understand it, honestly. Well, who says I'm supposed to? I don't. Let's have a little change of pace now, and we'll do a little rope trick for you. And something you've got to understand about this is that there's no such thing as a big rope trick. They're all little. Now, that ain't it. That's it. I'm going to do a rope. Listen, I tell you what I'm going to do. I believe it's the first rope trick I ever learned, honestly, in my life. It's a silly little thing. What you call a knot trick, and I learned it from a black man on my father's farm, a man named Dan Walker, and he taught me this, and he got me started on all this roping stuff, see, and my mother, God bless her, she used to say, Will, you're roping and you should be reading, and mother was right, of course, you know, but mothers is a special breed. A mother in Moscow can talk to a mother in Nebraska and never miss a word, you know. Saying to my wife, Betty, today, Betty, I said, you know, mothers and dogs is the only thing in the world that will give you eternal love. You know, no matter how you treat them, they always give you love and understanding. And my wife made me cut the dog out. She was right. So, you know, the dog didn't belong in there. I certainly meant no disrespect to mothers at all, you know. You know, we have Mother's Day. Maybe sometime we'll have Dog Day. You know? Make it up to Fido there. I'm stalling because I don't think this is going to work. I don't know what to do. Well, let's have a go at it and do it fast, and maybe nobody will notice, see? Just give her a pull and see what happens. And by golly, it worked. It didn't really, but it looked like it, didn't it? Well, now listen, don't applaud. That ain't bad for a 4-year-old kid, but for a grown man, it's embarrassing. But I'd like to say a word about my father, if I might. My father, well, you know, he was a father, is what he was. And from time to time, he used to say, Will, you ought to get out and do a little work around the place, see? And being a son, I wouldn't do any at all, naturally. But I just practiced my rope trick, see? And that's how I come to get on the stage, and it spoiled me for any honest work, you know. But I stole money with this little rope all over the world, and boy, I've had some great times with it, I'll tell you. Now, I was after the tie, and I missed. I wanted to get the tie there. Now, did you notice what? You probably didn't. You got to be very used to this kind of thing. At the last minute, the chair hunched to the left. It does it every night. Some doggone thing. Sometimes it'll shrug forward, hunch back, and stuff like that. What I was doing that time to go after the tie, just to give you a little inside roping thing, I was using what you call a winded shot. We had a wind, a little breeze coming right in through here. And what that'll do, see, that at the last minute, it'll flare the loop. Do you know what I mean? And it'll compensate, see, for whatever that darn chair might do, you know. But at the last minute, the wind stopped. I don't know. Congress must have adjourned or something. You know, folks, all I know is what I read in the newspapers. I don't make up my little jokes. I just tell what happened, and that does it. Boy, I tell you, they never fail me. Until tonight. Do whatever you care to, folks. Talk among yourselves. Just try to remain orderly, that's all. Tell you what, massage the person in front of you. Make a new friend tonight. Well, what do you know about that? I can't seem to find it. Hold the phone. Wait a minute. Now, look at here. This is what I mean. Here is a picture of a Negro, see? Now, he's got one of them truth machines strapped on him. I don't know what they call them, but you know what I mean. That tells whether you're telling the truth or not, see? All right. Now, right next to that picture, right next to it, is a picture of two guys testifying in front of a congressional committee in Washington. And all they got on them guys is silk shirts. Oh, boy, I tell you, God bless America for a sense of humor. That's all I can say. Oh, boy. Of course, they're having a ruckus in New York. Here's a little item about it. I guess you've seen that. I know I did. They want to close the bars by 3 a.m. in the morning. And people is kicking about it. And I think they ought to. Any guy that can't get drunk by 3 a.m. ain't trying. Traffic, oh my golly, traffic is terrible all over the world. You know, how can they call it traffic when it ceases to move? I don't understand. Did you ever try to cross a street in New York City? That's an experience, ain't it? You know, the first time I went there, I was kind of confused by lights. I knew the red and the green, but I didn't know the yellow. I thought maybe it was just faded, you know. And I asked a policeman, and he said, that's to get ready. Well, I was ready when I got there. I got a solution for the traffic problem, though. No car be allowed on the road until it's paid for. Folks, I'll tell you, we'll turn them boulevards into playgrounds overnight. And next, I got another one, but it's kind of scientific, so follow this very closely. Everybody going east, go on Tuesday. Everybody going west, go on Wednesday. North and south, forget about it. It won't work, but it's worth a try. It gives us something to do. Oh, they've unveiled a monument in the nation's capital to George Washington. I've seen that. That's good. George was great. You know, I've always wondered what George is missing by not being alive today. You know, he's missing seeing this great political system of equal rights for all and special privileges for none, working so well that millions can't get enough to eat, you know. He'd see rations being passed out, remind him of Valley Forge. I think he might sue us for calling him father, I honestly do. But it's a funny thing, ain't it, folks? Honestly, no country in history now has ever had more, and yet no country has ever had less, huh? 10 guys in this country could buy the whole world. And 10 million people in this country can't get enough to eat. I don't understand it. Well, who says I'm supposed to? Doctors say rates are going up. Well, I never knew them to go down, did you? Boy, I'll tell you, doctoring is a funny thing these days, ain't it? When I was a kid in the Indian Territory and you had a stomach ache, they cured it. Now they remove it. Well, you go to a doctor these days, you say, I've got something with my right eye, doctor. He says, I'm sorry, I'm a left eye doctor. I specialize in the left eye. And then, of course, the guy that makes the most money, he don't do nothing. He just tells you what doctor to go to. Diagnostician. He's kind of a traffic cop for sick people. But I got nothing against doctors. You know, they're as good as anybody. If they've had equal opportunity, that is. I had to mess with them one time, I'll tell you that. Of course, the story is very simple. It's just that the plot is called A Pain in the Stomach, is what it is. I was on a lecture tour, as I am now, but I was down in Mississippi, in a little town down there, and I got a pain in my stomach. Now, ordinarily, when you get a pain in your stomach in Mississippi, you would take it to be gunshot wounds, you know? But I guess the sharpshooters had all gone into the Rotary and the Kiwanis, you know? And, anyway, it was very peaceful down there. It couldn't have been gunshot wounds. I hadn't even done my act yet, you know? Unless some guy got word of it from another town or something. But anyway, I come right back to Hollywood, boy, right away. And I called up my doctor, and he come right over. And he started to mess around, you know, the way they do. And from where the guy was messing, I could tell that he wanted to do an appendicitis operation. I mean, he was salivating to put that one into the bank right now. You know what I mean? And well, in all my pain, with great glee, I said to him, the joke's on you, doctor. It ain't down there at all. And he looked kind of discouraged, you know. And he said, oh, where is it? Well, and I said, it's up here in the middle. Well, he moved up in the middle and he found gallstones. Now, folks, gallstones is a more expensive operation than appendicitis. I could have saved $2,000 if I just left him down there where he was. Then he said, we've got to operate on you. And I said, hold the phone, doctor. I said, listen, I read in the paper where you guys take a fella into the hospital and before you know it, he up and dies on you. And I said, not only that, I sometimes read that he'll die of something that you're not even operating on him for. And he said, oh, that will not be the case with me. He said, if I operate on you for gallstones, you will die of gallstones. Got on the telephone and he called another doctor. Now, every doctor these days has to have an accomplice. I guess you know that. They travel in packs is what they do. And the accomplice come right over, boy. And then the first doctor said, I'm glad you come. It looks like business, see? And the accomplice walked over to where I was lying on my couch of pain there. And he said, ha, 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 how are you, Will? He He said, are you sick? Good. He said, did you have a nice tour? I said, yes. He said, did you make a lot of money? And like a damn fool, I said, yes. Leave it to an actor to be so conceited, he'll ruin his own business. I don't know why. And this guy messed around a while, and then he said, we'll take you in tonight, and we'll operate on you first thing in the morning. Now, my wife Betty heard it, see? She started to cry, poor dear. And she run out of the room. And when they finished messing with me, I went into the other room to console my wife. And do you know what she's doing? She was looking at the insurance policy. Folks, my wife Betty is not one to quiver and shake in a crisis, boy, I'll tell you. She's got a good head on her shoulders. She really does. And I reckon I was paid up because they took me in that night, you know. And first thing that happened to me in the hospital, a gal come into my room there. She wasn't a nurse. She had on a little short skirt, and she looked like a manicurist, you know. And she didn't say nothing. She just walked over to my bed there, and she took my hand. You know what I mean? I didn't know what she was going to do with it. You know, going to kiss it, wash it, read it, or hold it. What she done was she took blood out of my finger there. And they kept taking blood, see? And finally an old dame come in, and I said, the joke's on you, lady. I said, I got no fingers left. And she said, oh, really? Well, we'll just get her out of here. And they did. Honestly, they took so much blood, I was sure they was keeping a friend who was anemic. Then they got me ready for the operation, and I had nothing on but alcohol. I could have licked my arm and got soused, you know. Then they wheeled me down to the operating. Oh, say, listen, when they was wheeling me in the door of the operating room, they was wheeling another guy out. Folks, I don't care how tough a guy you are, that's going to give you a little twinge now. See, I didn't know whether the guy had lived or died. But just then, he started cussing. Folks, he was under ether, but boy, I have never heard finer country cussing in my life. I mean, he had a rhythm to it, you know what I mean? He never missed a word. And I thought to myself, well, oh boy, even if you don't make it, at least you've had the satisfaction of telling him what you thought of him, see? And they wheel you into the, you know, in the side there in the operating room, they got a balcony. Did you know that? Where people sit to watch the op, and there was nobody there, and I thought, Willie, you've never done poor business in your life. See, listen, not to enter a somber note into the proceedings here, but folks, honestly, I didn't know whether I was going to come out of that room stiff or limber. I really didn't. No, it was they told me, a rather serious operation, you know. And the night before, I thought to myself, well, oh boy, I said, you've had a few laughs in your lifetime, and if you have to depart this world, wouldn't it be nice if you left with a laugh, see? So I thought and thought the night before in all my pain, and I finally thought of a dandy joke. It was a good one. It really was a good joke. What I was going to do was, just before they operated on me, I was going to tell it. See? You know, and then they would all laugh hilariously, and then if I didn't make it, they'd say, well, old Will wasn't so bad after all. Now, you know, when the guy reached over with the muzzle there, I was going to reach up, snatch it off, tell my joke, and let him go ahead. Now, that was my plan. All right. Now, did you know that when you get in there, that there's a guy behind you can't see? That's right. He's the guy that knocks you out. He's a wrestler on vacation, I see. Well, anyway, he reached over with the muzzle there, with the nozzle on it, see? And I reached up to snatch it off and tell my joke. And that's the last thing I remember. Folks, I went out like a light now, and to this day I cannot for the life of me remember that joke. I would give $10,000, honestly, if I could remember that joke. I don't know what they operated on me for, but they sure took out that joke. Well, I'm sure glad to see some of you come back. I'm going to do some of the amazing rope tricks that I've done in the Ziegfeld Follies. And now the only amazing thing about these rope tricks is that a grown man would do them. And that grown people would pay money to see him do them. I was known as the poet Lariat in them days. I know, ain't it terrible? I just awful. I didn't did not name me that, honestly. It was a New York sophisticated who named me that, honestly. But listen, no self-respecting Oklahoman would be caught dead with that phrase in his mouth. I've always felt that the Oklahomans who come to California raise the IQ of both places. As I was sitting back here just now going over my sins, can't hardly get a start on that in 10 minutes. I was thinking, honestly, was it not for the Ziegfeld Follies in the show business that right today I would be about 10 miles north of Claremore, Oklahoma, slopping the hogs and plowing for corn and knocking the Republican Party? Well, that's considered to be one of the chores where I come from, I'll tell you. Of course, it's since become universal, but... oh, no. I think it's worth telling you how an old cowboy like me come to get into the world of glamour and the Ziegfeld Follies. Honest, don't you think it's... Listen, Dave was doing a little skit years ago. Golly, more than I care to contemplate. And there was, who was it in the skit? Oh, yeah, it was Fanny Bryce and Bert Williams and W.C. Fields, and they needed a baby to carry on, to push on stage, I mean. And I had about as much sense as I've got today, and I said, I'll be your baby. And boy, I was, I'll tell you. They put on a little hat with a little fringe on it, and a little short skirt on me, and they pushed me on stage in a great big perambulator. And I was sucking on a milk bottle there, and W.C. Fields changed the milk to gin. Yeah, I don't know where he got it. He must have borrowed it. I don't believe he ever used it himself, did he? Of course, the joke was on everybody but me. I had a great time. Then I left the Follies and come into motion pictures, and only two things I claim for myself in motion pictures. One is ugliest man in them, and the other is only guy that still got the same wife he started out with. Now, usually when I say that last thing there, good people applaud, but don't worry about it. That's all right. These days, mostly I write. I don't read, but I write, By that I mean, the boy, when I write him, that's the end of him. I never want to see him again as long, once is enough. Boy, I'll tell you, I get paid writing wages, not reading wages, Say, listen, did you know they got a building at 20th Century Fox Studios there for the writers to think in? Just for the writers. No kidding, they just built it. And it's nice for the visitors. They can go and watch the writers thinking there. Did you ever see 40 writers thinking all at once? Did you ever see 40 writers thinking separately, by any chance? One writer thinking all by himself. But folks, when you've seen one writer thinking, you've seen 40. I can tell you that. They got no lock on that building at all there, because there's nothing in it, see? And, well, there's nothing anybody would want to steal, anyhow. I mean, everything in there has already been stole, see? That's the thing about that. You seen that, did you? I thought I was being sly. But that's what I call my gum garage under there. Listen, I'm going to stoke up again, folks. I really feel naked unless I have a chew or something. Not tobacco, I don't use that. But, rubber band or chewing gum. An amazing thing, chewing gum. My goodness. Do you realize they built an entire tower in Chicago out of chewing gum? That's what they did. They call it the Wrigley Tower out there. I contributed my disproportionate share. I can tell you that right now. No one in the world can tell you how or of what chewing gum is made. Did you know that? We know, of course, that our breakfast cereal is made out of sawdust. And we know that our $45 shoes are made out of old newspapers. And our all-wool suits are made out of cotton. But no one can tell you what constitutes a mouthful of chewing gum. It's probably a blessing, but they say chew Wrigley's, the flavor lasts. Well, they know that ain't true. I mean, after 10 minutes, you might as well be chewing on an old boot as far as any flavors go. But we love slogans in this country. My golly, folks, we get up in the morning, man, go to work and have our coffee and do everything by a slogan. You can even be born now by a slogan. They say better parents make better babies. There's a certain amount of logic in that one, I think. Don't dwell on it too long, folks. course, we raise our kids by slogans, every single one of them. You know, they say, what is it? Feed your baby cowlicks malted milk and he will be another Tarzan, or Jane, whichever the case may be. Then, of course, Congress has slogans. They say, why sleep at home when you can sleep in Congress? Join the Senate and investigate something, you know. Then, of course, there is the biggest bunk slogan of all, and that is, two can live as cheap as one. I mean, two can't even live as cheap as two, let alone one. Ministers have slogans. One of them is, let no man put asunder. And a quarter of the married world is asunder in less than a year. I mean, politicians got them, don't they, though? A guy, remember a while back, he run on the slogan of the full dinner pail. When he got elected, they opened it up. There was nothing in it. Just a little gas was all. And of course, we go to war. Don't we ever on slogan. Remember, what was the last one? It was make the world safe for democracy. Well, maybe we did. Ain't no nation tried it since, that's for sure. Then, of course, the political parties got slogans. In 1920, the Republicans ran on the slogan of common sense. Do you remember that? Folks, that's not an issue in politics. That's an affliction now, honestly. And the same year, the Democrats run on the slogan of honesty. They really did. That's not an issue in politics. That's a miracle, you know. Oh, say, listen. You can die now by a slogan. Did you see? You may have probably seen it out on Sunset Boulevard. Did you see that big sign they got up there now? It's new. You've seen it, maybe. It says, you will find satisfaction in dying if you know the Woodlawn brothers are to bury you. That takes quite a load off your mind, don't it? I've been sleeping a lot better lately. I don't know. And then, of course, the slogan I like best of all is the one we got in this country. We say, we have a higher standard of living in America. See, well, there's only one accurate word in the entire slogan, folks, and that is the word high. We sure are a living high, folks. I tell you, boy, we send our kids to school in automobiles now, you know. I hadn't noticed it affecting their grades perceptibly. Maybe. I think it depresses the kids a little bit. It's the gasoline fumes that does it. Say, America, I want to alert you to a coming problem that you may not have thought about. What are we going to do with all the filling stations in this country when they become obsolete? Hadn't thought about it, had you? Well, listen, I just point these things out to you. You're going to have to work out the solutions. I'll give you a little start on the problem, though. I seen one, a filling station that had been converted in Texas. It had been converted into a chili parlor. Now, that ain't a real conversion, because you can still get gas there, see? I apologize. That's hitting below the belt. There's no question. Just allow me one show. I don't know. I have a lot of fun. An old friend of mine named Charlie Russell used to say, Will, ropes is fine. Just keep them away from around your neck, you know. It'll give you a sore throat that'll last for days. I'm glad I mentioned that man, Charlie Russell. He's an old and dear friend of mine, and he died 6 months ago, and great loss. But I just thought I'd mention him, man. If you've never seen a picture painted by Charles Russell, you're denying yourself a great treat. And then you have seen one. Every one of you has seen it if I just get out of the way and let you see it. Here it is right here, and it's called Wagon Boss. And it's one of Charlie's good ones, I believe. He gave me about 13. He and Mrs. Russell after his death, and I've got them in my home in Santa Monica. You know, Russell was an amazing man, folks. He really was. He was, you know, a $30 a month cowboy. That's all he was. And, one day, he picked up a paintbrush now, and he slopped some paint on a board there. He never had a lesson in his life, honestly. And he sold paintings to the crowned heads of Europe. He really did, right along, you know, with the Whistlers and, the Rembrandts and, well, I don't know the rest of the original cast of painters there, but I don't mention the thing to be snobbish at all. No. I wouldn't have to mention Charles Russell to a connoisseur. And I don't know how to spell that last word, I'll tell you, but boy, I guess it's kind of a floor walker for artists is what it is. You know? But you know, folks, we got a great country here, by golly. A great country. And we've got a lot of great resources in this country, but I suppose our greatest resource, as in any country, is our youth, you know. But that's for tomorrow. That's for tomorrow, that resource. And another resource we've got is a thing called our past. But not the past, by golly, that we would like to have had it been, but the past that it in fact was, you know. And my old friend Russell here used to say, you know, if you just look history in the face, you'll learn something. Not the history that we would like to have, but the history that it was, you know. And Russell did so, I believe. Now you take, for example, a thing like the pioneers. What about them, you know? We was always taught, I know, that a pioneer, by golly, was a hero. No question, you know. But did you ever think, really, folks, that a pioneer was nothing more than a guy that wanted something for nothing? Honestly, now, think about it. He was a guy that cut down a tree. He never did think of planting one. Never. And he plowed up land that probably should have been left to grass. You know, that's why we got our problems down there in the Southwest, in my home. You know, they call it the Dust Bowl now. And you see, folks, what we're learning today now is that you can rob from nature just the same way you can rob from an individual. And it ain't just robbing from nature. It's robbing from future generations is what it is. And I believe that's what my old friend Russell meant when he said, look history in the face and you may learn something. And of course, the Old West, you know, was a unique civilization. It never existed before on the face of this earth, and it'll never exist again. And what it was the clash of two civilizations, the red man and a white man, and boy, they come together with a loud bang. And it was a lot of injustice and a lot of horror, and I suppose a little beauty along the way. And guys like Russell and Remington and Kaplan and Moran and Owen Wister with his little pencil there, he wrote some pretty good words about the Old West, but not many people really chronicled it as it was. And my old friend Russell did, in fact, and I'd like to say to you, if you ever want to really kind of taste and touch and smell the Old West, take a look at Charlie Russell's paintings. He was an amazing man, you know. He was a wild hand, I'll tell you that, boy. Old Charlie came into a little town in Montana called You Bet. Age 16 years, and he did a little too much of everything except go to church, folks, I'll tell you that. Charlie decided early on, one of the wisest men I believe I've ever known, he decided early on that he was going to leave the judging of his fellow men to somebody else. He wasn't going to take on that task, see? And Charlie was the kind of guy that if he was talking to you and he was painting and he stopped talking to paint, you'd want him to go on talking. He could talk and think straighter, I believe, than any man I've ever known. And I just thought I'd mention him tonight. A dear and good friend of mine, a $30 a month cowpoke. Now, I don't know where Charlie is today, folks, but boy, I'll tell you, wherever it is, it's a livelier spot than it was before he got there. A $30 a month cowpoke who painted scenes, folks, that will last for centuries. An old friend of mine. Thank you, Charlie Russell. Ladies, welcome. I always like to welcome the ladies, and very partial to ladies. After all, I issued from one, and you know, then I married one, in fact, and she gave issue to another one. And, so there's a certain connect. Listen, I want to touch base with you, gals, on one thing I seen in the newspaper recently. Now, I see soon women. They say women are going to be able to conceive children without male help. Did you see that? I don't know how they're going to do that. I don't know why they want to do it. I reckon it'll cut down on paternity suits considerably. But you know, there's women and money is the two most sought after and least understood things in the world. I guess you know that. But there's one thing, honestly, I do believe I understand about you gals, and just one thing, mind you. And that is that you are not the frail little flowers that you're advertising to be. I don't believe for a minute that there is one thing a guy would get into that a gal wouldn't get into and do just as good a job as the guy would, maybe even better, honestly. But you know, gals, an awful lot of guys have gotten into an awful lot of trouble because you said to him, you ain't going to let him say that to you, are you, John? You know, get in there, John, and get him, John. And, poor old John, you know, he piles in, and then Mabel piles in and does a better job than John done in the first place. They always say women don't want war, and boy, I tell you, I've wondered about that all my life. I've heard women don't want war, and I don't know. Folks, did you ever think that all the wives of the presidents and the leaders of the world would have to do is come home one day and say, John, or Boris, or Manuel, or whatever, if you let this country go to war, John, or Boris, or Manuel, I am going to leave you. John, Boris, or Manuel. Folks, history does not record any woman ever having left her husband for that reason. Although for every other in the book, including cold feet and dirty fingernails, Of course, no war in history, for heaven's sakes, would ever repay one mother for the loss of one son. But folks, the next time a mother points to a picture and she says, that's a picture of my oldest boy. Now, he was lost in the war. Look behind the mist in her eyes and see if there isn't a little glint of pride that wouldn't be there if she had to say he was run over by an automobile. Will you do that for me? All right. I want to show you something. Oh, no, wait. I want to show you something that I come today, and, it's very exciting, if I can find it. See? You know something? It's possible that I found it. But I don't believe it. I can never find nothing. It can't be, but I'm going to take a look anyway. For goodness sakes, I found it. Yeah. Well, I never do that. I can never find nothing. I don't understand. I must have mislaid this. That's how I come to This is a wire, and it comes today from a congressman friend of mine, and he wants to include, folks, a copy of my act in the Congressional Record. And listen, I'm not bragging, honestly, but I feel pretty big about it. You see, there is no greater compliment a humorist can have than to have his stuff in the Congressional Record. Well, just think, I'm going to be in there with Huey Long and all them other big humorists. Did I ever tell you about the first time I had some of my stuff in that daily? Well, I'm going to tell you about it anyhow. I'd written some fool thing pertaining to some bill they was arguing on in there, or kidding about, rather. And this senator wanted to read my little offering on the floor of the Senate. See, now, anything a senator reads on the floor of the Senate goes into the Congressional Record. And this other senator heard him, and he got up. And he said, No, I'm sorry. Now, wait a minute. I apologize. You don't get up in the Senate at all. You rise in the Senate, and he rose is what he done now. And after he had risen, the way they do in there, if you've ever heard them, he said, will the gentleman yield? Now, they call each other gentlemen in the Senate. I don't know why, but they do. But folks, they put a tone on that word gentleman. I swear to goodness, they make it sound like Will the Polecat from Montana. They don't say polecat, but boy, I tell you, they make gentleman sound just like it. And then the other guy says, I yield. He might as well, because even if he don't, the other guy's going to keep talking anyhow. He says, I yield to the coyote from Maine. They're very polite to each other in the Senate, boy, I'll tell you. Better get back to my story. Where was it? Oh, yeah, all right. Now, the guy said, I object. Now, this was after the yielding was all done, see? He said, I object to the words of a professional joke maker being included in the Congressional Record. Now, he meant me, see? He was taking a dig at me. But he was wrong, because compared to them guys, I'm an amateur. My little jokes don't hurt nobody, but when Congress makes a joke, it's a law, now. The law, it's a joke, I'll tell you that. They're funny guys, folks, honestly. I know most of them. Listen, you know what I believe? I think it's The Office that makes them so ornery. I really do. When you see what the guy does officially, you want to shoot him. And then you meet him in person, and he looks at you, and he smiles at you kind of innocently, You sort of want to kiss him, Anybody ever done any intelligence tests, do you know of, comparing politicians to the higher animals? Do you know, like horses, like that? I don't know. I've lived my life with horses. I don't know how smart they are. They're very utilitarian, fine-looking beasts, But Tom Mix started this whole thing about horses being smart. Old Tom and the Wonder Horse Tony started the whole thing. And I want to tell you, folks, I've known both them guys for many years. And I have always felt that Tom was every bit as bright as Tony. I really Oh, say, listen, a new statistic has just come to light, folks, in this very subject. It is now a fact and known throughout the whole world that no horse in history has ever gone broke betting on humans. Did you know that? Do with it what you will, folks. Do with it. Listen, I guess you see, of course you see in the saddle. I don't ordinarily carry that saddle with me. I've only had that saddle with me now for, well, I guess it's 10 days, really. And well, the reason I got it with me now is because it belonged to a very dear and old friend of mine. And, well, him and me come from Oklahoma, and we never met, honestly, now, until we got east. We had to get east and get sophisticated there. And we met, by golly, in Westport, Connecticut is where we met. And we took to each other right away, and I took him home that very day. And he arrived the same day that my youngest boy, Jim, arrived. And, of course, Jim was a baby, but little Dopey was a coal black, pot-bellied, doe-eyed pony, is what he was. And boy, I tell you, he come to stay. Really, he taught every one of my kids how to ride, and that's the truth. They learned at the age of 2, all of them, and Dopey taught them. I mean, if they fell out of the saddle, you know, he couldn't reach down, snatch him up, and put him back in. But boy, he'd look at him, I'll tell you. Much used to say, you know, that wasn't a very bright thing to do, was it? I used to sit on that little horse, folks, honestly, by the hour, really, and do my silly rope tricks, and he would stand, and he would never move a muscle. Well, anyway, the reason I got the saddle, actually, is because the little horse died 3 weeks ago, and I don't know, I just didn't want to leave it at home. And you cannot live 19 years with an animal and not feel a hole in your heart and your family when he leaves. And that ain't why I mention this at all. The reason I mention it is that in all the 19 years I knew that little horse now, I never knew him to hurt another living thing, purposefully. And I don't believe there are too many humans who can make that statement. Well, let's get back to the joke books here and see what we can find. You know, I've always felt that a guy in the morning with his coffee and no newspaper was just like a guy trying to ride bareback on a larded horse. It can't. Congress is deadlocked and cannot act. Well, folks, I believe there's hope for the country yet, I say. That's the greatest blessing that could befall this country. Well, what do you know? I hadn't even seen that. That gives us hope for the future. You know, I've always felt honestly about them guys in Congress the way I feel about the baby when it gets a hold of the hammer. You know, you just hope it won't do too much damage before you can get it away from it again. They're funny. Oh, I've seen this. There's a little item here in the back here. They've written a book about Calvin Coolidge. I asked my wife to get it for me because Calvin was a dear friend of mine and one of the funniest little guys that ever lived, you know. Oh boy, Coolidge was, you know. I always felt about Coolidge in the presidency, though, the way I feel about a guy with a ukulele. You can never be sure whether he's playing it or just monkeying with it. Well, see, Coolidge could have had a third term as president very easily. All he had to do was say, it's really my first. I didn't do nothing the first term. But Coolidge was not impressed by the White House at all. Not at all. It was just the free rent that impressed him about the White House. I was invited there for dinner, great honor, you know, and they fed the dogs at the table. Did you know that? There's nothing wrong with that now. It's just, I thought they was getting more than I was, see? Well, I mean, I was only there once. They was there every night, you know. I didn't give them nothing off my plate. We had fish hash. Yes, honest, I'm not making it up, honestly. It took me 3 weeks to get over it, honestly. Listen, if anybody ever accuses Calvin Coolidge of not practicing economy, just send for me, would you please? But I ain't gonna knock Calvin Coolidge. Boy, I'll tell you, being president of the U.S.A., folks, is one hell of a job now. You know, you gotta please everybody. Or no, enough to get reelected, that's all. But it's still one hell of a job. And people are always saying, what would Lincoln do were he alive today? Well, the first thing I believe the man would do is he'd stop chopping wood, you know. And he'd trade in his axe on an automobile, and being a Republican, he'd vote the Democratic ticket right away. being a friend of the underdog, he'd be a radical, you know, and having a sense of humor, he'd be an eccentric, you know. But I want to tell you, I'm for keeping our public officials for life. I really am, boy. I tell you, we would be a lot better off today if we had the original cast, folks. Just think about it now. We had no business letting Washington go at all. Now, to get back to Calvin, see? Now, Calvin done nothing. It's true. He done nothing. And he retired a hero. But it wasn't that he done nothing. It's that he done it better than anybody else. Of course, I could tell you a million jokes about Calvin Coolidge because I'm really very fond of the little runt. Now, Mrs. Coolidge, however, had more magnetism than any woman I've ever known. She could run things. Calvin couldn't, but she could, you know. She really could. I can do a mean imitation of Calvin Coolidge giving a speech, and I'm going to do it for you if I can find it. Everything in my life depends on finding it, and I'm going to wear glasses when I do this, and the reason for that is that Calvin always wore glasses whenever he delivered a speech. And the reason for that is it was the first time that Calvin had ever seen the speech, see? Well, I'm going to have to buy me a neat desk. That's all there is to it. This desk was sloppy when I bought it. Wait a minute. Hold the phone. By golly, I think I got it. I got it? That's another bad sign. I haven't done this. This is a bad night for me. Boy, I found two things. All right, this is a State of the Union message by Calvin Coolidge. Oh, State of the Union. Now, that means joint session of the Congress and the Senate, folks, so if you just pretend, will you, for me, that you're them guys and gals, the congressmen and the senators, it would help me a lot in believability. So, would you do that for me? All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to State of the Union message by Calvin Coolidge to the joint session of the Congress. No, you're much too alert, folks. Every third person go to sleep, would you please? Snore if you can. It would help you tremendously. All right, here we go. State of the Union message by Calvin Coolidge. I am proud. Notice I'm not moving my lips very much. Now, the reason for that is that Coolidge don't move his lips very much when he talks. He don't smoke cigarettes, but if he did, he could smoke them and talk at the same time. He's what we call back home a close chewer and a tight spitter. All right. There we go. All right, State of the Union message by Calvin Coolidge. I am proud to report that the country as a whole is prosperous. I don't mean by that the whole country is prosperous, but as a whole it is prosperous. It is prosperous for a whole. Now, a whole is not supposed to be prosperous. And we are certainly in a hole. Now, everybody I come in contact with is doing well. They have to be doing well, or they don't come in contact with me. I'm going to appoint a committee to stop all that small grass. It's grown to such proportions that it's interfering with large grass. Now I see where a lot of Americans are going into the stock market. As your president, I advise you not to gamble. Take all your savings and buy good stock and hold it until it goes up. Then sell it. If it don't go up, don't buy it.
Who would ever imagine our little Calvin ever delivering junk like nobody, you know? But it's why, you see, his ancestors landed on Plymouth Rock, folks, and that's, of course, where the whole mess begun. And it's called the Puritan strain. Boy, it must be, you know. Oh, but say, listen, I got into trouble on that. I gave a speech about 2 months around Thanksgiving time on a Sabbath Eve there, in which I innocently referred to the Pilgrims landing on Plymouth Rock. Folks, I tell you, I split New England right down the middle. I mean, they'd come down on me like a ton of shale. See, there's a place up there in New England called Provincetown, and they've adopted a slogan that says, "Do not be misled by history." Or any other unreliable source, but Provincetown is where the Pilgrims landed. Now that you understand, folks, that's a unanimous vote of the Chamber of Commerce of Provincetown. So from now on, Provincetown, I guess, is the official landing place of the Pilgrims, and any Pilgrim landing any other place is simply not official, that's all. And any Pilgrim landing on Plymouth Rock, well, it just serves them right, you know. But folks, I gotta say something. I believe that New England, there's a question that New England has got to answer before that one, honestly, to pacify the rest of America, and that is, folks, why in heaven's name was the Pilgrims allowed to land anyway? Now, I hope my Cherokee blood isn't influencing me, but folks, what if you turned the tables? Do you suppose the Pilgrims would have let the Indians land? Fat chance. Folks, they wouldn't let the Indians live when the Indians went to the trouble of letting them land. You know, Pilgrims was good guys. They prayed a lot, you know. Generally for more Indian corn, but I'll bet you never seen a Pilgrim praying when he didn't have a gun right along beside him. Did you? That was to make sure he got what he was praying for. I've never been able to understand, I gotta tell you the truth, that folks that were so proud of their ancestors landing on Plymouth Rock, you know, because my folks met the boats, you know. Of course, they did pray. We picked up on that gag in this country. Boy, I'll tell you, didn't we? Of course, our problem is we only use praying as a last resort. But religion's a funny thing, ain't it? People always say to me, "What are you?" And I have a tendency to say, "Well, I'm Homo sapien," you know, but that ain't what they mean, boy. You know what? And I finally say, "Well, all right, I was reared a Methodist," you know, and I was, mostly anyway. But you know, folks, I got to tell you something. I've never been a non-believer in my life, but I've been around this crazy old world of ours so many times and seen so many different mixtures of people and different hues and cries of people. And well, there's only one thing I really do believe, and that is that there ain't no one religion at all. I don't believe there is the religion for all people. And I also believe, now that I'm started, that if the theologians would just live by the example of our Savior and stop trying to decide on his mode of arrival and departure from this earth, then we'd all be a lot better off. And I think the church would do a little better, too. I ain't going to moralize at you, folks, not at all. I would just say this: if you're going to sin, do it quick, that's all. And you know what I mean? Don't let it be a long, lingering sinning. Get it over with. But to get back to old Calvin for just a minute. Now, when Calvin Coolidge was vice president, he done the right thing. He kept his mouth shut. It proved such a novelty that it just swept the country and made the guy president. Originality in any field will be rewarded, folks. Some nut one time suggested that I would make a good vice president, and well, it was a joke, but I thought about it a little bit. I said, what does the man do? Well, one thing he does do, he presides over the Senate with a mallet. I said, boy, I'd find good targets for that mallet in the Senate. Also, I would pass a rule now and in the Senate, and you see if this wouldn't shorten debate, folks. I would say that any senator who says all he knows has got to sit down. Folks, I tell you, I would have half them birds just getting up and nodding now. Why, about a third of them wouldn't be able to answer roll call. One final thing about Coolidge, though. I got to say this, folks, that Coolidge done nothing, it's true. But at that time in this country's history, nothing is exactly what we wanted done. All right, let's press on here and look into the wonders of the newspapers and see. Oh, wait a minute. Wife shot her husband in New York City yesterday. Well, the season opened early this year. Hardly a day goes by, that some innocent bystander ain't shot in New York City. All you got to do is be innocent and stand by, and they're going to shoot you in New York. The other day, there was 4 people. Did you see that? 4 people shot in one day. 4 innocent people in New York City. Amazing. It's kind of hard to find 4 innocent people in New York. But see, that's why a policeman don't have to aim. He just shoots anywhere. Whoever he hits, that's the right one. Had not seen this. Senate wants, did you see this? Senate wants to appropriate $14 million to buy food for the poor. Well, that's great. I'm glad. Why is it in the back section? Hold the phone. House of Representatives says no. Oh, no. Yes, and they give the reason. They say that it would be establishing a bad precedent to spend money to buy food. What? They must feel it would encourage hunger or something. What does that mean? Boy, they're a great bunch of guys, ain't they? This is the same bunch of guys 2 weeks ago appropriated $8 million to improve our highways. Did you see that? All right, America, now you know. You can get a road to anywhere out of your government, but you cannot get a ham sandwich. That's all it is. Pretty soon there won't be a poor farm in America that doesn't have a paved road leading right to it. That's good for the guy that goes to foreclose the mortgage, see? He won't get his flipper dirty. Women's hemlines are going up. Oh, my goodness. Soon they're going to have to say waistlines is going down, Listen, I got to jump. I shouldn't do this. I'm going to get Ned when I get home tonight, but I'm just going to leap in where angels fear to go. Gals, listen, please. I am not an old granny, and I'm not an old prude. I come out of the Ziegfeld Follies, and that is hardly the Methodist Church. But I believe some of you now, mind you, some of you is wearing your skirts too short. Honestly. I believe what you're trying to do, some of you, is imitate them Ziegfeld Follies, gals. And I would like to point out to you respectfully that every one of them gals was picked personal by Mr. Ziegfeld. Do you know he didn't let any old gal run around in a short skirt, is what... What I'm trying to say to you is, do not let fashion lead you further than your physical attributes will allow. To press into even murkier water by that response. Would you think I knew anything about women's corsets? Well, you'd be very wrong if you said no, because I'm an expert on women's corsets. Now, hard to believe, ain't it? For me too. But how I got that way, I'll tell you. It's kind of interesting. I give a speech at a luncheon, see? And it was the Corseteers of the World luncheon, or New Jersey, I guess it was. Corseteers of New Jersey is what it was. And I give a speech, and when you give a speech in America at a luncheon, you become an expert automatically. They give you a little card and everything. It's kind of a reward for eating what's painted on the plate there, Anyway, I'm now an expert on corsets, and how I got that way was, I was seated right between 2 birds that was in corsets, see? Well, no, I don't mean they was wearing them. I mean they made corsets, these guys. And I learned it's an amazing industry, folks. Don't for 1 minute put it down, When I told my wife I was going to give a speech to the Corseteers of New Jersey, she said, corsets ain't so complicated. I said, really? Tell me about it. She said, when my day, you just go in, throw $1 on the counter there, and they'd measure your wheelbase and your circumference and give you the proper model. Well, folks, let me tell you, it ain't true no more. Boy, they've got a big problem. You cannot let the human flesh, just expand promiscuously. No, folks, sooner or later there'd be no place for any of us to sit or to stand. There has to be a gathering place for everything in this world. They got a lot of different models. These guys is amazing. And they told me about them. I'm going to pass it on to you. They got one model there they call the front lace model. Now, oddly enough, it laces up the front. But more remarkably than that, you do not need a co-pilot or a Confederate to fly this thing. All all you do is you shuck into it first, see? And then you take the lines in your right hand and you tie them to a doorknob. Then you back up and suck up at the same time. Then when your speedometer reads 34 or 36, you just tie her off. That's all. They've got another model that is much more complicated and sophisticated than that one. Now, on this model, you do need to have two Confederates to operate it properly. And what you'd call the side lace model or the vice model. V-I-S-E, I hasten to add. And what you do is you shuck into it, see? And then you hand the lines to your two Confederates on either side of it. And they suggest that your Confederates be stout of limb and nimble of foot because... at a given signal, you suck in and they run toward the wall. And then when your speedometer reads whatever you want, you tie her off real quick. But they tell me about this model that it is so powerful that a woman in Duluth popped the buttons right off her shoes the first time she put it on. A thing I learned about that I never knew about before. It's a thing called the calamity of the broken corset string. Now, I know it haunts you gals day and night. I never knew about it, but I want to tell you, I just by coincidence was present when just such a calamity had occurred 2 weeks prior to attending that luncheon. And when it occurred, I had no idea what was happening. I went to a dinner party, and I was seated right next to a very nice-looking, thin-appearing lady. And right in the middle of dinner, the guy and I was pushed right off our chairs. Terrible. Calamity of the broken corset string had occurred there before our horrified gaze. Right in the middle of dinner, she just occupied 3 seats. And to show you how powerful that machine must have been that she was wearing, the woman was delivered to the party in a little roadster. And they shipped her home in a bus. Amazing industry, ain't it? I must say, boy. They may not have shaped the destinies of nations, but they've returned many a gal to a semblance of human form. And it's been great for literacy among males. Many a guy would never look at a magazine if it weren't for the corset, you know. Youth for Peace March on Nation's Capital. Now, I've been reading a lot about that lately. I guess you have too, huh? The kids don't want us involved there in the Yangtze River and the Sino-Japanese War, and they've been marching to keep from going to war. It seems to me they're getting just about the same training they'd be getting was they in the military, you know. But folks, listen, when you've got to go 7,000 miles to find a war, you've really got to be looking. I think we'd all admit. You wonder... we have scouts out to find them, you know. Because the thing we do worst in this country is mind other folks' business. I swear to goodness. We really do, But the joke's on the kids anyway. We ain't got no war over there. You know, we say we ain't got no war. Other side says we ain't got no war. And the League of Nations says we ain't got no war. Of course, the guys getting shot at say it's the best imitation they've seen yet. But don't worry about a thing, kids. We got the best politicians in this country that money can buy. But ain't it a funny thing, folks, honestly? Everything in the world is doing fine but humans. Why is that? Flowers had a great year this year. And, animals, no complaints that anybody can fathom. Anyway, and trees doing good. I don't know. Everything God had a hand in seems to be doing fine. It's just when something comes under the supervision of man that it's cock-on. Why is that, folks? We got great ideas, for heaven's sake. Peace is a great idea, and, share the wealth is a great idea. Perpetual motion is a great idea. Just one little thing wrong with all of them. They ain't going to work, that's all. We got more things in this country than any country in the history of the world, and yet I sometimes wonder if we're sitting on top of it. What do you think, huh? For every automobile we manufacture an accident, you know. For every refrigerator installed, we put on a murder, and for every radio, we put on a couple of robberies. You know, our jails are full, our courts are full, and our politicians are full, you know. I don't know. It's a funny thing. Just remember, though, this is a great country, by golly, but a great country, folks, in spite of our government, not because of it. Just remember that. Every one of them guys down there in Washington, they are no better and no worse than the folks that voted them in there, and I believe they're a good sight better than the folks who didn't vote at all, you know. But anyway, we got our problems, don't we though? My goodness. I mean, remember a few years back people were saying things cannot go on this way, and they were right. They got worse, you know. We got our problems, my goodness, don't we? You know, look at the politicians are always saying, I'm for law enforcement. Well, you know, for heaven's sakes, that's like an aviator saying, I'm for tailwinds, you know. Who ain't? The trick is to try to get one, see, that's the trick. I got a solution for the crime problem, folks. Just legalize it and put a heavy tax on it, that's all. So, you know, we tax some of our biggest businesses right out of existence. We might work with crime, you can't tell. But we're a funny country. We got a lot of monkey in us in this country, you know. You throw almost anything into our cage and we'll give it serious consideration. Until the new has worn off. But I believe, listen here, well, things ain't quite as bad as we feel. The kids don't think that the politicians can get us out of this mess. But I think they can. I mean, ignorance got us in. Why not? But these days, everybody's saying, you're trying to pinch my liberty. Have you heard that phrase a few times? You're trying to pinch my liberty. Take my liberty away from me. Well, hey, listen, let's try defining liberty. Shall we have a go at it and see what comes out? I would say, you know, now, some people say that you ought to be able to do anything to anybody, anywhere, anytime that you so desire. And I honestly believe that almost any nitwit knows that ain't going to work, really. But what I would say is that every one of us in this country should get every bit of liberty that we can get now. But just remember that you're only going to get as much as you give, see? Now, that's my definition. You're at liberty to come up with your own, naturally. Of course, listen here. You may not see things my way, folks. Why in heaven's name should you, I may not see things your way. Why should I? That's America. I believe. Up this little clam bake, and I tell you, boy, if you've had any laughs at all, I'm very grateful. And I don't give advice, folks, but boy, if I just say you're only on this world a very short time. For heaven's sakes, have a few laughs, and don't take things too serious, especially yourselves, you know. And just live your life so you wouldn't be ashamed to sell the family parrots at the town gossip. That's all. You know, that's for me, when I finish this lecture tour, I'm going to be looking up there, by golly, in the sky, and I'm going to see what's flying over, and Mrs. Rogers, in her wise ways, is going to say, Will, you're getting kind of restless, you better get on one of them things, and I am. I'm going to fly with Wiley Post to Alaska. By golly, I want to see that Alaska. I want to touch base with them Eskimos, for one thing, up there. As an Indian, I believe I can do them some good, you know. Warn them about the government there. You know, tell them about that old gag of the grass growing and the water flowing we talked about. Warn them about the politicians. You know, people always say to me, how do you get away with kidding the politicians? For heaven's sakes, folks, mostly friends of mine, really. And if there is no malice in your heart, there can be none in your gags, you know. I suppose if I ever had an epitaph, it should read that I've kidded about every prominent man of my time. But, well, I never met a man I didn't like. Good night, folks.